Hello, my friends out there in the universe of power. Welcome to Titan Talk. My name is Gabriel Pena. I am the Texas Titan. I am joined today by three of my online coaching athletes. I have here with me Deeandra Flores.
Hello.
Jon Parker. And
hey.
CJ Krause.
How's it going?
Guys, thank you all for being here with me today. You are all deep in prep for the official Strongman Games in November, this next coming month. How is everyone feeling? I mean, we are just about 1 month out. Where are we at? Dee, let's start with you.
I feel pretty good, assuming that, some of the events are repeats of like the regional competition, just that, some like the sandbags, for example, there's a little bit more heavier sandbags. But overall, I think prep has been really good, assuming that I did have to, adapt a little bit, but I mean, it's going really good. So I'm hoping, we do good next month.
I have no doubt that you will. What about you, CJ, Mr. Giant Slayer?
I'm feeling great, honestly. Like, I'm having some of the best prep I've ever had going into an event, and I'm very confident in almost every event, pretty much. Just got Chris up some stuff at this point, but not worried about the weights. I'm just ready. I'm ready now, honestly.
CJ's ready to be unleashed. And that leaves you, Mr. Jon. Where are you at right now?
I'm feeling stronger than ever. Definitely feeling a little taxed from training, but ready to go.
Well, I like to make sure that y'all's machines of work are just ready for all the trials you have ahead, because it's not just 1 or 2 days. We're talking about, we want all of y'all to be making 3 days of contest. A 3-day contest, which is essentially the world finale of this strength series, if you will. I know both CJ and Deeandra qualified at the Southwest Regional in Houston. Jon, how'd you secure your invite to OSG this year?
I actually came in 9th on the online qualifier, and I was going to do one of the regionals in North Carolina, but we ended up doing the online qualifier. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Now, with the online qualifier, it was a very static, strength-heavy set of qualifying events. Do you feel that, and this isn't just for you in particular, but do you feel that that is a fair metric of deciding who can make it to the show compared to the series of events faced at these regional contests?
I believe a lot of it's going into what they want to make the weights of the comp be, but I do feel that it's pretty fair. They had something from across each pretty much lift that was going to be also in the show, so I think it's a pretty good test.
Do you think that anyone who got in through the online qualifier is at a disadvantage compared to the athletes who got their invite at the regional qualifiers?
I would say, personally, like myself, I'm not a great presser. I'll go ahead and say it. And my sandbag and my deadlift dwarf the rest of my numbers. And so I would say I might be even at a disadvantage on the press. So it is possible, yes.
But that's just, we have 2 presses coming up for you all at OSG. You have the Viking press, and then you have the circus dumbbell. 2 very different presses. I mean, one is a extreme free weight, the circus dumbbell, and then the Viking press, you've got a lever lift where you're just going to be trying to fill that time cap with as many reps as possible and as much work as possible. So between those 2, the free weight throw and catch circus dumbbell and the lever lift Viking press, what tends to suit Mr. Jon Parker, who claims he is not the best overhead presser?
That lever lift, actually, I was able to do the comp weight fairly easily at Lynn's a couple weeks ago. And then the funny thing is, on the circus dumbbell, I can barely do the first and second dumbbell. 2
very different lifts, like I'm saying. I mean, this is you have one lift where you can kind of depend on the apparatus to support a lot of the weight for you, versus the circus dumbbell, an event that I truly don't like, but I mean, it is a classic test of strongman aptitude. It is one weight, one arm, as it's as serious as it gets. Now, the weights that we're talking about for you all, especially in respect to your body weight, I'm going to pull them up right here. When you do make it to that day 3 of the finals, that's where the circus dumbbell lies. Let's see, Jon, your dumbbell, your first one's 160 and your last one would be 220. CJ, you're in the 90s, correct? Or the 80s?
I'm doing 80. I'm 80s.
That's right. You're dropping down. Where's your weight at right now, CJ?
Yeah.
Are you gonna have to cut drastically?
I mean, I'm going to have my normal larger cut that I know. I'm in the mid 190s right now, so I'll get down to low 190s over the next 3 weeks and do my normal 15 to 18 pound water cut.
And for you have of your
shape.
Right, of your 4 dumbbells, yours starts at 120, and your last one is 180. And then Deeandra,
It's more than I'll be weighing.
Deeandra, your lightest dumbbell is 70, and your heaviest is 120. I mean, these are weights that last dumbbell is right there at full body weight. I mean, is that not a daunting task, especially at the end of a ladder series?
I mean, it's definitely daunting, but it's not doable. That's the thing. It's the circuit dumbbell stuff, in my opinion, is like less of a press, more of a technique. So as long as you can stabilize that and to get enough jump and like dip underneath it, it shouldn't be too worrisome for me. I mean, I'm pretty confident that I'm going to get through the whole ladder, even though, like we talked about, like at my weigh-in weight is actually under what the dumbbell I have to press.
Yeah. What about you, D? Circus dumbbell, day 3, a 4 dumbbell ladder from a weight that's about half body weight to a weight that's full body weight. Where's your head at when you're attacking that event?
Like CJ said, it's more technique, I think, than an actual press. The lower you duck, the less you got to actually press, the circus dumbbell. So I think, if my technique is there, I think I'll be able to complete them.
Now, I do want to touch on something that you said. The lower that you duck, that can be a very fine line for the athlete to have to walk, because like any leg-driven press, the longer the muscles get, the less explosive they get. But you can't just barely dip, because you're not going to get any of that leg drive that you so desperately need to throw and catapult this weight up. So, and this is for all 3 of you, where do you find your happy medium with depth in the leg drive, but shallowness to maintain that explosiveness? How far does some people find that they're going into almost a half squat, whereas others just kind of right down and right back up? D, what? You sound like you're using a lot of legs to power that up.
Yeah, I mean, I do rely on my legs a lot. I mean, that's just how I press in general. I mean, my push press is always, throw and catch. So that's the same method I use for circus dumbbells. So it's not like a super low dip, but I mean, it's low enough to where I can use, my legs majority of the way up. Right.
CJ, you sound confident in this event as well. Would you say that you're going real deep on your leg drive, or you're keeping it short and shallow?
No, I don't go too deep on my leg drive. I mean, the heavier it gets, I go a little bit farther, but I never really go near parallel. It's more, I treat it like a high jump, is the way I think about it. I leave the ground even when I do my press, where I'm just catching it from that explosive nature, and the bell's already up there once I'm exploding through. So I would say like the most I ever go to is like maybe above a half squat. I've never really like analyzed it directly like that, but when it gets heavier, I do have to load a little bit more.
Right. And even getting the body to get airborne on that lift too, that's kind of a really good way to know that you are putting max explosiveness into it, but then you're also ready to duck under it if you need to, which is tying into that whole throw and catch nature of it. Jon, what about you, my friend? How are you feeling with your leg drive on this thing? I know you are a kindred spirit to myself. We both don't like circus dumbbell too much, and it's okay. We can talk about it.
My least favorite.
Where are you at with the leg drive?
Get rid of one implement. I would say I'm feeling a lot better recently than I have been ever on circus dumbbell. I'm confident I can get any weight to my shoulder. It doesn't matter what the weight is on it. It's just getting it up from there afterwards. I'm getting better at leg drive. Still not great, but it's there. It's getting there.
We are definitely putting some serious work in. And before we go into all the other events, that's something I do want to talk about, is the intense prep that it has been up to this point. Because all 3 of you, all 3 of you are prepping for the same contest. You're getting put through similar drills, the intense rigor, and in the recent weeks, we've even had to include some deloads in there just so that the body can kind of have a breath to take that relax and recovery when it needs it. And I'm sure you can relate. Following a lot of the people that you're going to be going against, it's very easy to see who is going to burn themselves out before they even get there. Have y'all noticed that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I tend to see it's very often on the sandbags. That's the first event that comes to mind, because I was just talking to Deeandra about this. This year has been the year of the sandbag. Like every freaking competition has had some sort of sandbag event, which is great. It's a very hard object to handle, and it prepares you well. But at the same time, can we do a contest without a sandbag?
I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I like sandbag though above all the things, but it is getting kind of played this year.
I can easily see how the regional qualifiers, having the sandbag series, it does make sense to have the finale with the sandbag series. But that is an event where I think, especially with the weight of the ladder itself in those last two bags for every single class, I'm thinking of biceps, I'm thinking of lower backs, and I'm just thinking of total central nervous system fatigue. I want to hear from each of you uniquely, and I want to start with Jon. What have you noticed in this last month of prep, especially in terms of the toll that your body is taking from drilling these events over and over again?
I have noticed a lot of bicep tightness from sandbags in general. And I consider myself pretty good at that event. That's one of my favorites, actually. But overall, between that and I'd say yoke, I feel the most beat up. It's a lot heavier yoke than I've ever done. I think in the last 2 to 3 months, I've hit a 200-pound difference in my yoke. So it's definitely wearing on me a little bit.
And what do you feel when it wears you? What are, I don't want to necessarily use the word symptoms, but what indicators is your body giving you? Hey, we need a break.
Getting up and moving in the morning sometimes, my feet hurt, my hips hurt, and my hips hurt and my feet hurt more than anything, probably.
And with the hips especially, I feel like you notice that right off the bat, because the second you get out of bed, wham, that's right there.
Oh, yeah.
CJ, what about you, my friend? What sort of fatigue indicators do you get from your body?
A lot of it's just responses with me. I have really good recovery, actually, more than I think most people actually get. So I'm really lucky in that factor that it hits me at weird times. My biceps were the biggest thing this whole year. And we've been careful with my biceps all year. They've been getting tighter and tighter. Even going into Houston regionals, they were tight. All the training for it. That's been the one thing that doesn't get fatigued the most on me. But I would say when I'm not as explosive is the only thing I notice when I need to take a break. It's the weight still moves, doesn't move the same speed. But when it comes to soreness, tightness, I don't get too much of that. I guess I'm just fortunate, or I don't know. I could deadlift on Thursday and run a heavy yoke on Saturday and feel fine Sunday.
You're just a machine, my friend. And I know I'm going to ask Deeandra the same thing, and I know what she's going to say, because it's you and Deeandra are both machines. You can be beat up one day, but the next day you're ready to go. And I don't know if it's because y'all are the lightest weight classes on the roster, or if there's a correlation there. But what about you, Dee? I rarely ever see you tired. How do you know when your body needs a break?
I would just say my body needs a break when, I'm mentally tired. I don't think it's a physical thing. I just think it's more mental, just because, having to move these heavy weights, it's just oh, here we go. I have to do this heavy sandbag because, I do get, some bicep tightness, maybe more my shoulders, just because of, the pressing. But, I mean, just an indicator, when I need a break is just, my mental, a mental fog, I just need to get away from the gym for a little bit.
Like mental fog in what sense? When you're experiencing it, you get to the gym and let's say you got a heavy log press day, for example. What is the mental fog that you feel when you step up to that log?
I would just say just like how CJ said, you're not as explosive, or the weight's not moving how it normally moves. So then I just get in my head a little bit, just because I'm my body's tired, but I want to actually move the weight, just my body doesn't want to.
And when it's time to take a break, what are you thinking? Are you thinking let's just lock it down, not train for a week, or let's go to the beach for a couple days? What is your release and relief for that?
I just take a couple of days off. It's okay to take a couple of days off.
That message alone, it's okay to take a couple of days off. I know you guys know it because you're under my tutelage, but there's a lot of people out there who just want to keep. It's under the misconception that to get better, you just keep training aggressively, and not allowing that time for recovery. But we're all at a point now in our different strength journeys where we know and appreciate how much the body is a machine. and to keep that machine at work, like you got to give it the care. What is y'all's sleep looking like? How many hours are you averaging? We'll start with you, D.
Well, I am a full-time student, so I try to sleep as much as I can.
Disclaimer.
So I'm going to say maybe like 6 hours.
CJ, I'm putting you all on the spot. CJ, where's your sleep at?
Not enough. Not nearly enough as it's been. I'm like in between jobs right now, so I'm working basically 2 full-time jobs. So I'll like get up at 3 a.m., do cardio, go to work 4:30 a.m., work until noon, and then go to training, go back to work at 3. So there's some nights I get 7, some nights I get 4. It just depends where it's on. But I'm gonna get a lot more sleep over the next few weeks, and that changes. But yeah, my sleep is like one of the hardest things for me right now, just my current life situation.
John?
I'd say my sleep now has been a lot better than it has been. I recently changed from rotating shift work, working 12-hour days, to working like a normal 9-to-5 job. So that's changed a lot, and I'd probably say I average about six hours a night.
That's a fair average. And 6 hours is what I would say, like as a strength athlete, this is the bare minimum. And we all have our own like disclaimers, like student, between jobs, between shifts, parent, whatever it may be. That is like the fundamental component of what we do. And there's no joking around that. The nature of, I got into this on my last podcast episode. The nature of what we do is breaking ourselves down over and over and over again to build ourselves back up stronger. But are you guys picking up that audio? My Huskies are singing an opera in the background. I wonder if that's going to come out. But breaking ourselves over and over and over again, if you don't have that sleep to be able to depend on, you're just digging yourself up into a bigger and bigger hole. And 6 hours is what I would definitely say as a coach. If you are getting less than that, you've got to find some way to make up that deficit, because it will catch up to you. And sleep deficits are a real thing. If you go a whole week, CJ, getting 4 or 5 hours, there's going to be that weekend when it finally hits and you're like, wow, I just slept for 12 hours. How is that possible? And I'm still tired. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, definitely. I've experienced that a few times in different preps and that. I'm really big on naps when I was like only in one job, but now that I have the 2 in between, I have my nap time no goes to the other job right now. But I used to do like 4 hours of sleep, get up and then nap and then go to training. But yeah, I definitely now feel that 12 hours sometimes.
It is, and it adds up for sure. But you touched on it, CJ, that now in these last few weeks leading up to contests, now is the time to implement whatever changes you need to know that you're not leaving any stone unturned, whether it's the sleep, whether it's the hydration, the nutrition, the outlook on training, the mental fog, whatever the cases may be. This is the time to do it. With regards to nutrition, all of you are in weighted classes. All of you do have to make weight. I know there's athletes out there who will be listening to this thinking, what are your best tips for cutting the weight? I can only go so far, and I've told you all this when you've asked me for a direction on this. I'm a super heavyweight, so take my recommendations for cutting weight with a grain of salt compared to some of the other elite athletes in your weight divisions. But, CJ, what is your biggest tip for cutting weight prior to a contest for any keen ears that might be listening?
Yeah, my biggest tip is to, one, know your numbers, because you know exactly how your body reacts to things. Like, always weigh yourself first thing in the morning to see have everything going, especially weeks out. So you know, and sometimes I weigh myself before bed when I get closer, so I know my water shifts for when I'm getting closer to water cut. But the biggest thing I could say is, once you know your calories that you're going to start losing weight on and do it gradually, don't plummet, start finding high volume foods that are low calories. Like, I eat, like, sometimes I'll have six cups of greens with my meal just to, like, have that satiation, or like, and then find like different ways to like get that satisfactory flavor. Like, there's some, like, a lot of times I'll make like low calorie French toast with like egg white protein powder and sugar-free maple syrup, and it's like 200 calories. It got the satiation out of it first. I'm a big sweet tooth person, so don't like avoid things you like. Just realize you want the flavor and then find a way to make it fit.
So essentially, eating things that take up space for the sake of feeling full without getting the calorie load.
That's one big piece of it, yeah. And especially, like, there's so many other variables to it, but also, like, again, finding the satiation taste as well so you don't binge. So that's the hardest part mentally a lot of the time is, I'm so hungry all the time, I can't do this. And then you just overeat and you set yourself back 2 days. because you just couldn't do that. But if you find ways to satiate and then find ways to feel the fullness as well, and then of course water intake is important. Make sure you're getting that high water so you still feel full as well.
Good. And now, CJ, you're in the under 80 kilogram class. What does your average weight cut look like in terms of how many pounds you have to lose?
Are we talking from start to finish, or are we talking from water cut?
I would say from start to finish, like from this point right now, between now and contest.
Okay.
What does that look like on average? Not just this contest, but historically.
Yeah, historically with 4 weeks out, I am typically sitting close to like 200, and I'll get down to like low 190s for the week out. So that's my goal. I'm actually a little bit ahead of that right now, but I would say 200 or 202 is about what I've normally sat on about 4 weeks out. So
essentially about 10 pounds of body mass weight that you're cutting, and then another 10 pounds of water weight, more or less, when it comes time? I do a very large cut compared to most people. I really walk that fine line of being able to make it safely. So I would say it's about 6 to 8 pounds of actual weight loss, and then anywhere from like, I would say 15 to 18 pounds of water. Gotcha. Jon, you're in the 105s, so this is quite a bit heavier than CJ's class. What does your typical weight cut look like?
I typically float around, like I would say 235 to 240 anyway. So my weight cuts aren't really anything too crazy. Pretty much just clean my diet back up because I know I slack off a little bit during the training season just to try to get calories in and everything. Dieting's pretty much one of my weakest points. I'll go ahead and say that actually.
We're strength athletes, brother. We love to eat. So you're talking to kindred spirits. What's your biggest tip for super heavy? Yeah, well, hey, come to the dark side, my friend. You got the deadlift strength for it. What is your biggest tip for weight cuts, Jon?
Honestly, I just try to eat clean. Like, is my biggest thing. Like, try to eat simple carbs, stuff like that. Nothing that's going to be too complex. And like, I got to stay away from processed stuff. That's my biggest thing.
Absolutely. Now, the simple carbs versus the complex carbs. What's the methodology behind there? Because typically when people think about clean eating, they're thinking whole grains, they're thinking about things that don't raise your blood glucose level too quick. But you said simple carbs. You find that the white rice, the easier digestible carbohydrate sources are better for you in times of a weight cut?
I'd say they are for me, just because they don't stay on me as long, gotcha. And they're a lot easier for my digestion.
Probably a little bit easier on like the bloat feelings too, the water retention, like you were touching that. Now, the male weight cut is different than a female weight cut. So it's one thing for two guys to be talking about their weight cuts, but D, what's the female perspective? You're in the under 140 pound class. Mm-hmm. And I know you haven't had to do any drastic weight cuts, but what are your biggest tips for cutting weight?
I would say just cleaning up the diet. And then from a female perspective, I know I had seen a couple of athletes that are actually right now in nationals talking about how they had to cut weight on their menstrual cycles. So, there's always that factor for some of the females. It just so happens to happen that week. But I think with that, you just have to know your body. It has to do with water retention. I know that there's some cuts that I've done where my body just doesn't want to get rid of that stubborn water. That's just because of like the female hormones. Mm-hmm. But I know if I've actually had weight cuts, so I track my menstrual cycles. And if they so happen to fall on a competition weekend where I know I have to weigh in, I always, I would say take that into consideration. Maybe eat a little cleaner, knowing which foods also retain water. So there's like certain foods in my diet that I know that will retain more water just because I know my body and how it works. So I'll just avoid those foods just so that it can like balance out once I weigh in on the scale.
Right. I feel like that is definitely a level of being in tune with not just your own body, but knowing how your body processes these different nutrient loads. Mm-hmm. And my turn as a coach, one thing, my biggest tip for any of the athletes, including yourselves, having to go about these weight cuts, really be cautious and vigilant and receptive to how your body is going to handle the actual travel. Mm-hmm. The choices you make vary greatly depending on if you're driving or if you're flying. If you're driving, you got a long distance to travel, you have to take that into consideration. And if you're flying, same thing. You have to take into account what you're eating, when you're eating, and accounting for the stresses of airport travel as well, because not everything is in your control anymore. When you're driving, sure, it's in your control, but you are sitting for a long amount of time. When you're flying, flights can be delayed. You have only certain nutrients available to you there at the airports. So that would be my biggest advice, is know how to plan ahead and be ready for everything. If you are driving and you're driving a long distance, I've seen my wife through a weight cut when we drove across the country, and it is a completely different ball game than a weight cut when you're just hopping on a plane back and forth. So it's my biggest advice for you all right there. But back to the contest itself. OSG has quickly gained a lot of traction in being the biggest contest for weight class athletes, or one of the biggest contests for weight class athletes. The coolest thing and most appealing thing about this competition is you have all divisions. Unlike some of the contests where it's just the weighted classes, or it's just the heavyweights, or it's focusing on one individual group, this is everyone. It's going to make for some long days, but you all will be in the midst of the proven best athletes, not just in the nation anymore. This is worldwide, the world's strongest man or world's strongest woman in your respective weight divisions. What does it feel like stepping into that realm? Anyone can pick up first.
I guess for me, it's a little overwhelming just because I haven't been at that like high caliber competition. So I'm kind of nervous, but I think I'm going to have fun with it.
How are you going to counteract those nerves when they set in, when you get there to the venue?
Like every other comp, I just go through the first event and they go, wait.
It all comes down to that first pressing event. It's always the pressing event. CJ and Jon, y'all been doing this for a while now. You've had the experience of some of the bigger stages. You both have taken away wins this year as well too. How are you feeling stepping into the arena of the world's strongest? CJ.
Well, I'm coming back again after making the finals last year, so I have a different mindset than I had last year. Last year I was like just trying to see where I place it once at home. This year I feel ready to attack it 100%, and I'm highly confident in everything in my ability, especially after this past year I've had at these high level shows, doing well in Clash, doing well at different levels of events, setting records, things like that. So I'm the least nervous I've been, which is like, I'm just feel ready. I don't know how else to explain it. And it's just one of those things that I think came with doing so many high level shows and having the opportunities to do them.
Jon?
Honestly, I would consider myself still relatively new to Strongman. It's a huge, I didn't even see myself making it into OSG, and it's huge for me. So that alone is going to affect my nerves a little bit. That knowing that I'm going to be up against arguably some of the strongest people in the world. You have people that are pressing super heavyweight in middleweight now, which is wild. So my nerves will get to me a little bit, but I think once I get into it and get moving, get talking to the people, get out there, I think I'll be fine. Rainier was my first multiple day competition, so that was a whole different aspect as well. And I didn't expect it. I didn't even know where I was placing on the events. I was just going through it and just doing the best I could. And
you came out of there with a crown on your head. Yeah. So the one thing that I would want to chime in and say to the three of you and to all the other athletes competing at OSG, when those nerves do set in, what you have to remember above all else is that you are tried and tested and you earned your spot there. So this is not something that you skirted by on. Your performances all got you there. So you have to take confidence and assurance in knowing that your skill level is what dictated your presence there in that spot. And once you know that and just understand it to be true, these nerves become a little bit lesser and you're able to focus more on the task at hand and not so much being overwhelmed by the company that you're around. But I will say in regards to the company, you all will be around people that you've seen on social media. You all will be around people that you've only gotten to talk to through a screen. people that you're itching to get to pick their brain, take pictures with, socialize, whatever it may be. But the one thing that the competitor cannot lose track of is how to bide your energy effectively, because every interaction that you have at these big contests can take away from your performance. If you know how to effectively toggle your switch on and off, you can walk that line very well. But if you're the type of person that even when you're having these communal interactions, that switch is always on, by the time you get to your event, who knows what surplus of energy you still have, if there is a surplus left. You might have had that dwindling battery icon by all the conversations, all the pictures, all the socializing, that you're tired when you step up to that implement. Because a 3-day contest is an endurance game. It is more than just ultimate strength. It is lasting, it is strategizing, and it is knowing how to bide your energy well and using it when it counts. But something that you will see undoubtedly in your fellow competitors. I want to go back to these events, and I want to kind of go through them one by one. We got to talk about the circus dumbbell. We got to talk a little bit about the Viking press on day one. But the rest of day one, you also have the farmer's walk. And I feel like this farmer's walk event is a little bit brutal. You know, you're going to have to carry a lighter pair of farmer's handles down 50 feet, back that 50 feet, and then pick up an even heavier pair of handles and carry it a final 50 feet. So this is 150 total feet with a weight change in the middle. I just feel like that's kind of a brutal curveball to throw y'all's way. And grip strength is one of those, I say this from experience, this is one of those events where if you do not train it, you miss out on a significant amount of points. But we've been drilling it, and I believe either this week or last week, depending on where your programs are at, was when you get to drill the full run on this. And you can share as much as you feel like. And I know some of you guys might feel apprehensive about your fellow competitors or rivals listening, but let's hear some insight from the actual trying of this thing. How hard is it to go down the 100 feet and then pick up a heavier set of handles? Who's got the weakest grip? Step up first.
I mean, I can chime in. I got this. I mean, it's definitely challenging. But I believe Farmers Carry is my best event. And it always has been, in my opinion. It's actually the only event I've never lost in my entire strongman career. So I'm not daunted by the weights of these, but I can see as a competitor, if these are heavy weights to your grip, it can definitely be something very challenging. So I've seen fellow people at my gym that are training for OSG struggle with this event and the way you pick it up and things like that. I'm just highly confident in it, but it's definitely a long duration on that one. It's definitely a lot of technique that people don't, I think, realize is there when it comes to these events. Like the way you pick them up, the way you move your wrists, the way where you grab them, the way your feet move. They're all little things that I can take into consideration on this event, and the way you transition too. Like if you see me ever do, I jump out of them, and I'm really good at timing that. So it's just little things like that that saves time that I'm highly confident in with this event, especially. And like I said, with the U80 weights, I feel like a 290 it's heavy for my final farmers, but for me, I think I'm going to do very well.
Yeah, well, you have a grip strength that can rival a lot of super heavyweights too, CJ. Sometimes you follow up with me and tell me how your sessions have gone. I'm like, man, CJ could very well kick my ass on a farmer's on one of these days. But D, this farmer's walk, this full 150 feet, where are you at with it? You recently set a pretty big farmer's PR, like in this year. You hit the 200 pound per hand mark, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the confidence of knowing that you have.
I can move the weight.
You can move the weight.
It's just like CJ said. It's a technique game.
What technique are you thinking?
It's just more, the way you grab the farmers, because you are doing two different sets of farmers, so your hands are gonna fatigue very fast. And if you know how to change your grip or how to, where to place it on your hand, then you'll be fine.
Jon, what's your insight on this?
I'd say like 150 feet is a good ways for me, and 330 is my top, the heavier set for me, which is kind of at the top of my range on farmers right now. And I would say it's not so much my grip, but I'm slow, so just the time in hand is what really wears on me. And just picking up that pace is really what's getting to me.
Yeah, and I think the biggest factor here, at least from my perspective, is going to be understanding the time aspect. Understanding the time that you have a full 150 feet of distance that you need to cover. The longer you spend with those weights in hand, especially the lighter weight, it's going to take away from that reserve that you have left for that heavier weight at the end. So I feel like the competitor needs to know that there is a sense of urgency. The second you pick those things up off the ground, your power is dwindling. Are you going to be very slow and impactful with your steps, or are you going to try to glide, get that head down, and just move across the course as fast as you can? The athletes that can pick up that pace and do it smoothly without the farmers teetering on them, that's going to make or break the performances here. And even more so, the transitions. The turnaround after that first 50 feet, and then the repick of the second handles, the second pair of handles. You're going to have athletes who get to that second heavier pair when they finally get there, and they're going to sit there forever psyching themselves up. And you all know when you're there psyching yourself up to pick up or to go about your next lift, time moves a lot faster than what you think in your head. You might think you're down there for only 5 seconds, but before you know it, you've lost 10 seconds on the clock, and that makes all the difference in like 15 placings. So this is definitely an event where time is going to be a big factor here. Time where the grip is strained and time spent on transitions going back and forth. Would you all agree?
Yeah.
100%.
Definitely.
Definitely an event where, you know, this is going to show like who spent more time doing the things that you're going to be tried on the first day, and who spent a little too much time worrying about the finals and not worrying about what you need to do to get there. But that you're going to see that about in every single contest. I know in my prep for World's Strongest Man, everyone was training the Flintstone press, the behind the neck barbell press. But the reality is that only 10 out of the 20, out of the 30 of us made it there. So it's like there is kind of a good side and a bad side to knowing all these events so far out. And the pressures of seeing all of your rivals on social media can often lead to making poor decisions in terms of how to structure your week. But you guys have another set of eyes watching over you. So I feel very confident that you have all been training your grip strength and are ready to attack this with the full extent of your ability. And it's just a matter of putting the pedal to the metal when that whistle blows. Aside from the farmer's walk, you know, that caps off day one, and then we move on to day two. You finish off day one with that heavy, you know, hip hinged movement, a lot of the back power, a lot of the traps. And then you go into day two with the axle deadlift and the sandbag to shoulder, another two big back exercises. Now, the axle deadlift is unique in a way that it's a big axle bar, but you're going to be standing on a platform that makes this the exact same height as a standard axle. So it has the cool factor of being a very big bar, but this is a normal height deadlift just with a very dead weight. But all three of you are really great deadlifters. I don't think this is going to be a weak event for any of you all. I feel like this is the time to shine and really gain some points, especially if there's an unfortunate shortcoming on any of the events on day one. So with this axle event, CJ, I want to start with you because you are the holder of a deadlift record here. What are your thoughts going into this thing? Being your strongest suit, how are you going to approach this axle deadlift?
I'm very excited for this event. The second they gave us like standard head axle, I was like, awesome. It's the same exact weight as I did when I competed at the Houston Regional. I was a 90 kilogram, and I was able to hit double digits on that one. The big variable on this one is that it is tires instead of being like an actual wheel on that one to make the height on that, so it's going to be bouncing more. That's the real variable that I have to worry about, but it's farther out, so it should feel a little bit easier. And 550 for me, I'm not really worried about. It's more my pacing. So I think my strategy going to this one is making sure I'm pushing the bar down into the ground on my resets to limit that bounce and just be ready to find a rhythm to go into it instead of any kind of rush on that. Because the more you rush with something like tires, they're going to start bouncing and shifting you. You're going to need to counteract that force and just keep that pace on that realistically. So that's one thing. But the thing, I think, again, axle deadlift's a good event for me. I think everyone knows that pretty much across the board. It's about counteracting the bounce more than anything else.
When you're going for the top spot in this event, max reps in 60 seconds, you're cramming as much work as possible into a short amount of time. You're going to have the athletes that it's going to mean the world for them to get a handful of reps. But then you're going to have the athletes such as yourself that are really trying to maximize just how much work they can get done. And it comes down to these factors of understanding the apparatus that you're lifting on. You've got tires. All of us have lifted on tires at this point, and we know even if you set it down softly, that thing still wants to move around. So if the athlete is being so far rushed that they can't make sure that bar is in the optimum position, if that bar is too far forward, we're straining the lower back, we're straining the hamstrings, we are wasting energy, and that might be what makes or break that last rep that happens at 55 seconds on the clock or not. And but that's knowing the apparatus too. And I'd be keen to know what the exact rules are going to be on the day of, because for sure you're going to get down commands, but with tires at play, there might be the possibility of up commands, and that's another curveball that you have to be ready for. Even more so, the variability between judges, because you will have those stickler judges and you will have judges that are just very quick to let you go with your next rep. But Jon, thoughts going into this axle deadlift? Max reps in 60 seconds. You've got a big deadlift,
honestly,
my friend.
I can't wait. When I messaged Lynn after I saw him post it was going to be an axle deadlift, the first thing I asked was what the height was going to be. And I could not be more excited when he said standard height. The tires themselves, I believe he did say there's going to be an up and down command. Don't quote me on that. That made me super happy as well. I hate seeing people bounce deadlift, so it'd be way too easy with the tires. And you've been beating my ass on full reset deadlifts anyway, so can't be more excited for this.
You are all very well equipped for this event. And D, going into this one, I mean, just like CJ, you had a max reps event in Houston at the Southwest Regional. Especially with that in mind, what insight did you get from your performance there to take with you going into this next bigger deadlift?
I guess just technique. I know that there was some like down commands where I almost missed and I didn't get a rep. Also, like, it just goes based off the judges and how long they, until they give you the down command. But I do feel prepared because I've trained on tires, so I know, the balancing and all the factors that go into that type of deadlift. But I'm really glad that it is a standard height and not an elevated deadlift.
I hear all of y'all so glad that it's a standard height. Well, I know you would be ready to kick some ass in an elevated deadlift too, but are you more glad because you know that this disadvantages other people? Is that it? And you are just really ready to go?
I feel like elevated deadlifts are just more awkward, and they just benefit people that just don't have this different I'm gifted at longer arms and shorter femurs, so having that at a higher height, I can't get as much leg drive as I can from standard height personally. That's what I feel like. Anytime it's 13 inches, I feel like I'm leaking power because I can't engage as much of my legs, and so
What if this was a deficit deadlift? Would you all still be happy?
Deficit than elevated.
Really?
Yeah, I would take deficit over elevated. Yeah, I would take deficit 100% over elevated.
I know the bigger weight classes, like the opens, would not like that. The opens especially do not like the deficit deadlifts. But it's all.
They need to get more flexible. The U80s can touch their toes. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I make sure I can touch my toes too. Thank you very much. Okay.
There we go. You're good to go then.
Yeah, I might just jump right in. Sandbag to shoulder. You got another ladder here, and this is a 5 ladder series. A 5 ladder series with a 75-second time limit. So for anyone who's going to complete this ladder, you have to be hitting that one rep at least every 15 seconds. And that's a fallacy to say in a lot of ways, because if you're pacing yourself to do one rep every 15 seconds, that heavier bag is going to take a lot more maneuvering time to get up versus the lighter ones. But just to give you an idea of what the pace is. But this is an event where this is the one that I've seen the competitors train and post on social media over and over again. It's cool to see the ones that have, practiced over and over again to where their skill is really getting that finesse. But this is also where you're starting to see people get burned out. You're starting to really see people get burned out. And sandbags are one of those events where if you have injured a bicep before, if you've torn a bicep, if you strained it, you know that this is one of the ones that can really do it, especially if that thing slips away from you when you're trying to pull against it. So I feel like having this as the last event on day 2 is going to wind up hurting a lot of feelings and maybe some bodies in the process. It's a very heavy ladder. I'm even looking at the top sandbag for the opens where I would be competing. That's a 375-pound sandbag to the shoulder. And Jon, your last bag, 350. CJ, your last bag, 300. And D, your last bag, 225. Like, these are all weights that are just absolutely well over body weight, almost to that 1.5% or 1.5 times body weight mark. Just on that last bag alone and biting your energy to get there, I want to know the strategies that you are all thinking at this point. And I will start with D.
I would say just be smart because, you know, you already went through day one, and the first event, that deadlift. You know, you have to be cautious. Like you said, you know, the biceps are going to go. So with that last bag, you just have to play it smart, I would say.
Playing it smart when you're wrestling a possibly moving object. There's a lot of time where the athlete has to spend in that unideal ramped lean back position. And you've experienced that. In that moment where you have the sandbag and you just feel like you cannot get it any higher up off the body, what are you going to be telling yourself so that you don't give up and you don't drop it and you just keep wrestling with it? You got to think of this now, because I guarantee you, everyone's going to be put into that position with the final bag.
I feel like it's just going to throw me back to regionals and how I didn't get that last bag. So just be like a little PTSD moment. So I feel like that'll give me motivation to get that bag up.
Motivation through the anger of revenge.
Fuel for the fire.
Jon, the last bag, lasting through the series, getting to that 330-pound bag, or 350-pound bag, excuse me. What are you thinking getting there? I've seen you in your qualifying videos. You got close to 400, right?
I had a 407. Yeah.
407 to shoulder as a 105 kg athlete. You had some plates taped to the end, did you not?
Yeah. Yeah, I taped some, it was full of lead, and I taped some 25 to the end of it.
Just hearing what you're saying, it was a sandbag filled with lead, and you had to strap even more weight to it. Like, this is the beautiful sport that we all live in. We all have these brilliantly messed up minds to where we just figure out how we can make it more gruesome. But getting to that last bag and getting it over, I know you're capable of a 407, but a 350 at the end of a 5-bag run, that's some serious stuff.
Yeah, the 350. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That 350 bag is going to be it's going to be a lot different for me than the bag that I trained with. It's a lot longer. The biggest thing I would say is I'm going to blow through the first couple bags as fast and as safely as I can. Not trying to be too reckless with it. And then once I get to that 350 bag, if I get into that position where you're saying, you know, you're fighting it, you're like maybe too low on your chest, my biggest advice is not be afraid to like set down back to your knees, reset, get deeper on the bag, and get those hips into it, explode more out of it if you can. Because my biggest thing, I like to get it straight from hips to shoulder, like as quick as I can. I don't want to fight with it in the middle. And like you can spend a good amount of time fighting with it, like in that low position.
And it's ideal to get it from your hips to shoulder, but when that doesn't happen on those bigger bags, especially when they're sitting on the lap, standing upright, and you're stuck wrestling with it, that's a different ballgame. And that's where that mental fortitude aspect comes into play. And that's where the athletes who have kind of trained to that 90 to 95% range really get separated from the athletes that were a little hesitant to go above that 80, 85% range in terms of the bags. You don't really know what that crippling effect feels from the weight until you get there. And even more so, what you all need to prepare for is how different the bags that you're going to be competing with can feel from the bags that you were training with. But these are all things that you have to feel out in the warm-ups, because it can come down to what type of sand they were filled with. Were they filled with sand? Were they filled with rubber? Is there lead shot in them? Or is there chunks of plates in them? Whatever it may be. You know, these are things that the athlete has to be ready for and be ready to adapt, especially in those warm-ups. But CJ, it comes down to you. And I saved you for last because I will call him your rival from the regionals in Houston. Cameron, correct?
Yep, Cam Peters.
you guys were just incredible to watch because y'all skill matched each other tremendously on every event. It was a nail biter every time you guys both stepped up to face against each other. But when it came down to that sandbag to shoulder run, what insight do you have from your performance going against Cameron at that very high stakes finale in Houston that you're carrying with you to OSG in Florida?
The biggest thing I'm carrying with me, though, on this, Cam, by the way, I think is going to win that event for the 90s. I think he's the best sandbag to shoulder I've ever seen as a 90 kilogram. He just effortlessly does it. So I knew going against him, I'd have to go into that. Because luckily doing it as a 90 kilogram at OSG regionals, they're the exact same 4 bags plus an extra bag. That's all it is. It's the same run for me plus an extra bag. And I finished in 27 seconds on 4 bags. So it's a good run. He just finished in 16 seconds. So what I'm taking from that is there was only 3 guys that finished the whole thing at our regionals. And between both regionals, I believe there's only 5 90 kilograms total. For the same series, I threw as an 80 plus 1 bag. So I think a lot of the 80s are not going to get through the 275, even though a lot of them are training singles. That's not what the event's about. It's about being able to flow through them. And that fatigue hits you by that 4th bag. And I've learned training recently that 5th bag, it really hits you. So I think my biggest strategy is, getting the 3 I know I can hit, take the extra time I took like I did at the regionals on that 4th and make sure I hit it in one clean motion. And then give myself that 40, 45 seconds to really set up and get that 300 to shoulder. So I do think that's going to make or break a lot of the points. I don't think anybody's going to sprint through all 5 of them. Because like I said, even in the 90 kilogram class, less than a third of the field will finish 4 of them at a weight class above us. And I understand these are elite athletes that probably on par with a lot of it or better. But I think that's just something like hitting 300 is more important than sprinting to it. And I've seen everyone do singles. Singles are great. I can hit a lot of singles. But it's just different when there's 5 bags. That 5th bag is so brutal. I just ran my first 5th bag recently and wasn't going full comp weight.
This is the thing with ladders, though, is ladders are very hard to set up in training, period. It's a lot of objects. It's a lot of setup and takedown time. It's hard to do, but you cannot effectively replicate the training without it, because you can think that you're training, step up to a bag, shoulder, step back, step up to again. It is not the same as feeling that increasing load, having to articulate your steps, keep your composure, keep your coordination, and maintain that aggressiveness on an ever-increasing load. It's a very tough thing to do, but this is another event where, especially how it dictates who goes on to day 3. These last few weeks of training, it is going to be monumental for the athletes competing to be able to replicate this and understand how their body is going to fare and be able to make whatever changes necessary so that you can maximize and optimize your performance on comp day. But that's it. That's the thing. This is the event. This is going to be the last event for the vast majority of competitors. Only a select few who can prove themselves up to this point will go on to day 3. But day 3, when you get there, what a day that is. I mean, you've had an abundance of back testing events up to this point, and then you start off day 3 with that car walk. Now, Jon, you live close enough to Lynn Morehouse to where you can go out and train at Morehouse Manor. You've gotten to see these cars. Have you gotten to pick them up?
I did, actually, and I'm actually going this weekend. But that's my first time with a cross member like that big. I think it's a 4-inch cross member on the top of that thing, so that's a different thing. Pushes me a little farther forward, I feel like. And the weighting on them is definitely something to be said. I think they're 650 empty, and if you teeter-totter at all, the tires hit the ground, they're going to throw it off your back, and you are done.
That's what I was going to ask about, because I did a car walk in Glasgow, Scotland last year with Giants Live, and those tires were fixed. So if you teetered and one of those tires hit the ground, it bites and it'll throw you right back. And that single aspect of it puts a lot of pressure on you all to make damn sure that you get a good yoke height when y'all are doing yoke heights. Because one, I mean, the whole line to walk here is you don't want to pick something too low and have to do a massive squat to get the thing up. But at the same time, this is a car. This is not a yoke. A yoke has a very small footprint compared to a car. Even a Volkswagen Beetle, it's still a car. it's got a lot of mass in the front, a lot of mass in the back in terms of distance away from you. So if you tilt just a little bit, if you're used to just barely skimming by with like an inch of clearance between you and the yoke, that's not going to be enough. And the last thing you want is to have to keep repicking this thing up over and over again because you picked a height that was too high up and your tires keep skidding on the ground. So this is one thing where you need to make damn sure that when you all are getting set up and measured for this thing, when you get onto day 3, that you are wearing the exact equipment you're going to wear for doing the carry, all the way down to, you know, your belt, your straps, your sleeves, whatever, because the way that you support yourself can have a very different effect on your posture, with the biggest one, of course, being the footwear. Make damn sure you're wearing the shoes that you're going to be using on yoke when you get that measurement. But this is a tough event. This is a tough event because it's a big load. And, you know, when you think of it from just the sheer weight standpoint, it might not seem quite as heavy as it's going to feel. But when you think of it from the fact that it is a car that you're walking with, this is serious stuff. Dee, how excited are you to be yoke walking a car?
I'm very excited.
This is like hallmark of a strong woman right here. Your thoughts going into this, because this is different than a yoke.
I would say it just be prepared for anything, just because it isn't a normal yoke, but also just to have fun with it because it is a car, and those are some badass pictures that I want to get.
Hell yeah, that's a trophy you get to take home, and it is a straight sprint though, and that is one cool thing is if you can stand up and you can feel stable and you just gun it down, you're over as soon as you get to the other side. There's no repicking or turning around or anything like that. John, you've got a strong back proven on deadlifts. You've gotten to pick up this car. From your own experience with the car, besides knowing how the tires will bite down, how does that weight feel when it teeters on your back, especially with that big 4-inch cross member you were talking about?
I'll go ahead and say the first time I picked it, I think it had 670, 700 in it, and it threw me forward. Like I took my normal stance, and I feel like as soon as I stood up, it threw me forward, and like I about fell out of it. So you got to be very, very deliberate on how you set up and how you find that midpoint with that car.
CJ, you've posted some videos recently of you just sprinting down a course with a heavy yoke on your back. Very Mitchell Hooper-esque, if I may say. How are you going into this thing? It is a car. Have you done a car walk at this point?
Yeah, they had it at OSG last year.
That's right.
I've been on the exact cars, yeah.
That's right. So with that experience already, going into this year, you know, you have the advantage of doing it once before. Building off of your performance last year, what are you thinking going into this?
I learned a lot last year with the car. I'm still bitter that they didn't get a picture of me in the car, and some others did. Like, I'm still like upset about that. On a side note, like, how did you miss that picture? Like, I'm just bidding it. That's the one I wanted. But I will say it runs very different than the yokes you're normally using. The way the weight shifts. I actually did set up a little bit conservative, a little bit too high. My tire did skid about 5 feet before the line I had to repick, and I still was able to have a good run, but that definitely cost me points on that one. So, like, my best advice with these, like, cars, it's going to teeter, it's going to totter, but I still recommend going one notch lower than we normally do. And in your training, I would do the same thing. Get used to that initial pick to suck and just be ready to run on that one. Because I push my yoke forward and I get, like, a tilt to it because I'm really good at creating force and generating that force. So the yoke carries me. So I'm more moving my feet as I'm going. But I definitely, on the car yoke last year, it was definitely, I needed to go lower than I was used to, and I yoked pretty low. So, like, that's one thing I would recommend is if you're running that car, start training at a lower pick. Yeah, it's going to suck, but you're going to be able to not hit. The second that tire touches the ground. You know, on a normal yoke, if you're scared, you kind of get away with it, and you rebound yourself, you stop. It's dead stops you, and I found it out firsthand.
It's a very different beast, and I'm so excited that, you know, the car walk is brought to this competition. I think, you know, hats off to Lynn for making it happen, but this was a thing that you only saw at World's Strongest Man, and that was only for the open weight men. And now, Deandra, as a lightweight female, you're getting to walk with a car on your back. Like, that's just it's the coolest thing. It's a badass spectacle. And I can't wait to see the pictures. CJ, you need to make sure you go talk to that photographer this year in person and be like, hey, do not miss the pictures of me because I need to make up for last year.
Well, at least it's in the finals this year, so there's at least going to be only hopefully one set of cameras on it versus like where they're running back and forth all last year in the prelims. So
there you go, man. And after the car walk is a circus dumbbell, which we already touched on. I mean, that's going to be its own beast in a certain way, but that's where the shoulders at least get to come into play for a little bit. But you do have a ladder here. It's only a 60-second time limit, but still, you know, it's the same thing as the sandbags. You have to, at minimum, be getting that one dumbbell every 15 seconds. But we got to talk about the dumbbell earlier in the beginning, so I won't go back to it. But the Atlas stones, the hallmark of all strongman. Everyone has a 6-stone series. And this is, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. This is where it all comes down to at this point. If the athlete is not good at stones, it's going to cost them the competition. You know, you can have as much of a lead as you want. If you wind up fumbling the stones, if you wind up messing up a pick, messing up a load, this can be what the game changer of it all. But Jon, you have incredible stone lifting ability. You ready for this thing when you get there?
I am so excited for stones, actually. It is day 3, and when I get there, I hope I'm just able to move by day 3. That'll be the biggest thing because that's going to be a lot of taxing on the body, especially after that yoke. Just being able to use my hips like I want to on stones is going to be rough, but I can't wait for it.
CJ?
I mean, stones are never my favorite event, but I'm good at them, so I'm going to do everything I can, and if I got to get all of them to win the show, I will.
D, this will be your first 3-day competition. What unique challenge does that pose to you when you're thinking of a car walk, a circus dumbbell, and Atlas stones all on the same day at the end of a 3-day weekend?
I guess just strategizing the recovery between day 1, day 2, and day 3. Just because day 3 is, 3 full events and it ends with stones, and your body's already been through the whole comp. Every part of your body's been taxed. And then the stones requires your full body movement. So I would say strategizing the recovery between those days. But I do love stones, so I feel like that will take away a little bit of pain.
How are you feeling about that top stone? That's because your weight on the top stone is 275. That would be a PR for you, yes.
Yes.
But are you ready to claim that PR?
Yes. I'm looking forward to it just because my last PR was a little too easy. So I feel like I have a lot more left in the tank.
I love things like that. My last PR was too easy. But the strategy going into this 3-day event is what's going to make or break competitors all across the roster. It's, from the nutrition aspect, you have, of course, the cuts that you have to do leading into day 1. But then once you make that weight, you have the loading, getting your body as full and as energized as possible with all the carbohydrates and some fats, not too much protein into day 1 because, you all will have had rest time prior to that to where you're not needing to recover. It's just a matter of filling the tanks. So a lot of carbs, some fats, just feeling really full and muscles ready to rock and roll. But when you go into day 2, that's where things change. You've done 2 events at that point. The body does need to recover. You got to be having that protein along with your carbs and fats, and even more so for the athletes that make it to the finals on day 3. There is that knowing that you have to be building the body back up as strong as possible in such a short window of time, getting the sleep, especially in the midst of the nerves of being there at this world championship event. And on top of all of that, you have the strategy at play with biding your performance on these first 2 days leading into day 3. Because one, it's the same thing that I have to face, when I go to World's Strongest Man. You have to know that this is a long competition that you're going to be enduring. So you have to be strategic and not going full YOLO on every event. But at the same time, if you do not hit the marks that get you your qualifying score into the finals, ni modo, that's it. Like you don't have what you set out to do. And it's a tough line to walk. It is a very tough line to walk. I will say, though, that in terms of making it to the finals, when you all get there, when you get to that sandbag to shoulder, you have to know, like, wherever your placing is currently, how deep do you tap into your strength? Do you go into that YOLO mode and just leave absolutely nothing behind? Or are you sitting comfortably enough to where you do just what needs to be done so that you can get to the finals with the most abundance of energy possible? It's a tough thing to do, but this is the World Championships, the world's strongest, for a reason. And I'm damn proud of all of you for getting there. Like, this is serious stuff. And I know, Jon, Deeandra, this is y'all's first year. CJ, that you're returning, building off of last year. There is a lot of potential here to come out of this stronger than you've ever been. And I'm very excited for all you all. And this next question, I don't want it to be taken with anything more than a grain of salt. Because the most important thing is you, and that's it. But as far as rivals go, who are you all looking forward to competing with the most? I know, CJ, you already brought up that Cameron, you all had your epic showdown in Houston. And I'm sure, Deeandra, you're going to say the same about Jess.
She's not going to go.
Oh, she's not going?
No.
Oh.
She's doing nationals.
Cameron's a weight class above me now, too, so I get to cheer for him.
So, well, then that gives plenty of answer possibilities for this. Dee, who are you looking forward to competing against? What rivals do you have your eye on?
I don't have any other, rivals. I would just say just being able to compete with, Hannah and Rhiannon in the same, playing field. I just want to I look forward to that.
CJ, since Cameron's in the weight class above you, who are you looking forward to going against?
So many guys. They're all great friends of mine, but I can't wait to go against them again, especially off the clash. I want to see Ricky again, the current world champion. Tommy's always great to go against. Josh Kowalski, someone on my, I call it a hit list of people that have beaten me that I need to get back at over the years. So I've got a list of that. Robert Hughes, same thing. Now he's on my hit list. So I love these guys to death, but I want to end up by the end of my career beating every person that's ever beaten me at least once.
Well, you're sounding very confident and ready to attack these things head on, so I have no doubt that you're going to achieve that. But, Jon, what about you, my friend? Who are you looking forward to going against in the 105s?
Honestly, I love to see where I'm going to stack up against Camby and Mike O'Connor. Those two dudes are kind of monsters. And honestly, my training partner, Tim, he's also competing with me. He's the one that got me into Strongman, so we're going up against each other, so it'll be a good time.
That's going to be a damn good time. It's always great when training partners get to go head to head. But as far as training goes, getting to go train at Morehouse Manor, does Lynn make his facility open to athletes, or is this like a special invite thing only?
So he pretty much every Sunday they have a strongman get together. Whoever wants to come out to it, it's at his house, his garage. He's got everything set up out there, and just hit him up, and pretty much he'll let anyone come out there.
So it's not an unfair advantage to those who go out, because the door's open to anyone who wants to make it out there.
Yeah, that's and I think who was I talking to? Erin Murray's flying in. She's coming in to train at Lynn's this weekend.
That's awesome. A good way to get your hands on the actual equipment that's going to be used. So I do want to touch on the deadlifts a little bit, because you are prepping for a max reps in 60 seconds endeavor here on an axle, but you all are all also supreme deadlifters, in my opinion. And I like to think that my opinion as a fellow supreme deadlifter goes a long way. Thinking of your ultimate goals with the deadlift, I know, CJ, you want the all-time world record in your division. D, as far as deadlift goals go for you, I'm pretty sure I can guess what you're going to say, but what's your biggest deadlift goal right now in this moment?
I want to rep that comp weight because I haven't actually hit it, but I feel like with all the adrenaline, I'll be able to rep it. It should be easy.
Jon, biggest deadlift goal right now?
Let me think. Honestly, I'd like to beat you on trap bar deadlift, Gabe.
Well, I will say you are one of the few men on this planet who can do that. You know, when I set that unofficial deadlift world record on the trap bar, I knew it was you and Asko Keru over there in on the other side of the world in Estonia that you guys were going to be two of the guys who could contest me on that. But so you would say that's one of your biggest goals, to try to beat my trap bar?
That's one of them. I would say I would like to take away the win on the competition win on the deadlift at OSG as well. And then I want to try to pull like 800 on a Ukrainian, actually.
That's trust me from when I say that's a very long pull, my friend. It's a long way up from that one, but I have no doubt that you have the ability to do that. I put out a little questionnaire on Instagram the other day to see if any fans or friends had questions they wanted us as a panel to answer. This first one is from JS Strength. How did you prep for deadlift change as you got stronger? D, let me start with you. Very simple question, but as you started to add, let's say when you made that journey from 225 to 315, what did you have to change with your deadlift?
My form.
In what regards?
I have a lower back problem. I call it the little shrimp. And so that jump, I had to really fix that, and still fixing it. It's gotten a lot better as my deadlift has progressed. So I guess just going back and seeing your weak points in your form and fixing that, and usually your deadlift should increase.
I am going so far to imagine that the changes you had to make from 225 to 315 are much different than the changes you had to make from 315 to 365 and on. That realm of really big weight, what unique challenges did that pose in terms of your deadlift form, technique, ability?
I think that was more, I guess, still technique. Actually more strength than technique, because there's like weaker muscles, and just going back and fixing those.
Where would you feel like those weaker muscles lied? Would it be in the upper back, the lower back, the hips?
The hips.
Yeah.
I think I struggled with my hips a lot.
That is the main driving force for this lift. It really is. CJ, as you got stronger, what did you feel were the biggest changes you had to make in your deadlift?
One of the big things that made me have really big jumps in my deadlift was actually not trying to replicate a deadlift I saw from a good deadlifter and figuring out what my body leverages are. So a lot of times I can see that I used to try to replicate what someone else is really doing, and they have different leverage points than I do. So once I learned that, I saw very major shifts into what I found was my best leverage point for my body type there. So that's one thing I think a lot of people should work on, is not trying to replicate, but find what their leverage points are.
Understanding the truth that we are all very unique, and even the differences in arm length, femur length, torso length, that all plays heavily into how the posture should be on the deadlift. What about you, Jon? What changes do you have to make as you strengthen your deadlift over the years?
Honestly, I would say my biggest one is I finally had to get out of the ego lifting realm. I would go in and I loved the deadlift back in the day, so I would do it all the time. And then a biggest part of it for me is it's mental. I know how much weight. If I don't know how much weight's on the bar, it's better for me half the time. And I'll approach it differently. I won't sit there and get in my head about it a lot. And another thing I would say is making sure my hips aren't as tight as they get doing a lot of different movements. Like after yoke, I know my hips are going to be jacked up for a little bit.
Yoke is one of those movements where y'all may have remembered me telling you at some point over a training together that any day that we have a heavy yoke in training, I really don't advise training the next day. It is such a nervous system and just total body shocker to simply just walk with that weight crushing down on you. But it's very hard to expect that you can go about normal strength training after that. It's tough. But I will say for myself, in regards to JS Strength's question, I would say around the 700 to 800 pound mark, in terms of pushing my max there in development, learning how to use my upper back effectively and learning the role that the lats played in making sure that bar does not pull the shoulders or soften the torso a little bit. Sure, you see these different characters in the physical therapy realm or in even just the strength training realm tell you that a little bit of backgrounding is okay. But the truth is, if you're trying to picture the machine that would best lift this, there's not going to be any soft structures there. It's very rigid, very straight, very firm. The second that power goes on, you should see or feel some sort of movement in the bar and not in the body. And I firmly believe that the lats are one of the biggest power players there in forbidding any sort of movement, especially through the upper spine. So for me, learning the role that my lats played in keeping that bar right up against the body, and more importantly, not allowing the shoulders to drift forward. And then on, and something that I still make sure that I'm very critical of myself on, especially in this realm of the 1,000+ pound deadlifts, is if I'm getting down to the barbell, and when I am turning that switch on to start pushing the bar up, if anything feels uncomfortable, like getting into position, if I feel tight, if my gut feels like it's pressing up against the legs in a weird way, if I feel like my abs are in a cramp, if something feels off, don't just overlook it and hope that it feels better the next day. Like, these are very real data points that your body is giving you that you have to be proactive about, especially for myself. If I'm going to be chasing the world record, like you say, Jay, you're chasing the world record. If there's any little thing that's off, you got to be proactive in fixing it, or else that's just power that you're missing out on. And that's a big thing that I'm dealing with now. But in the early days, it was just knowing the role that the upper back played. Another question that I got: how do you know you're using your leverages effectively during deadlifts? And this was asked by Tim the Ginger Cox, another one of our fellow Los Titans, who asked, how do you know when you're using your deadlift leverages correctly? CJ.
When everything moves together. That's pretty much how I know. It's like when I have the slack and all moves in that like same straight line as it's going up. When I feel the tension in the bars proper, it's all little things like that, and it's all firing at the same time. Versus ever feeling staggered, the bar's not. If it comes away from you forward, or it comes away towards you too far, you're in a poor leverage point, or if you feel like some muscle isn't activated with everything else. That's one of the biggest things. I started once I found my leverage spot. Everything just worked together as one cohesion, not like a split, not like a breakup. It's like literally like all together in one shot. That was my biggest thing I've noticed.
John.
I would say, honestly, if the moment you feel, like the moment I feel any pain is the moment I know I'm out of position. Like if my back starts to cramp up, if anything like that, like is normally an indication that I'm a little off somewhere. Like I'm leaning too far over. I'm looking wrong. Like I have a bad habit recently of like looking down at the bar all the time for some reason. And that throws me forward, and like I'll notice immediately. That's about it.
D?
Same thing. Like if I get pain, I already know that it's going to be a little bit off. Usually my hips will give me some trouble, so I usually don't push my deadlift heavy if I know that my hips are already kind of giving me trouble.
For me, I feel like if you, and I'm sure everyone at this point, or at least people listening, think back to Eddie Hall's 500 kg deadlift, or even Hafthor's 501, and knowing the immensity of that weight, but then when you see them lifted, just how the bar just seamlessly goes right up. We could spend time talking about how Eddie's lockout was a little bit more labor than Thor's, but that's besides the point. When you have such a heavy weight that so closely resembles some of the last warm-up weights leading up to it in terms of just the seamlessness in which it leaves the ground, where there's no drag, there's no lag, there's no grind, that's when you know like everything is just finely tuned at that point. You don't have any shortcomings. It's just a very smooth lift from A to B. And that's where I feel like I like to refer to it as the heavens open up and the angels sing sort of concept. And that's the thing. If you don't have that smooth lift, even when you're dancing around the 1 rep max realm, it should still feel, ideally, it should still look very smooth. And if it's not, well, then we have to kind of go back to the drawing board and see why there's leverages that are faltering or lacking at play. One more question I wanted to ask. This is from Ray Barriant. What does Strongman offer or give you that no other sport can? Jon, I'll start with you.
Honestly, I came from powerlifting before this. I would say they're two close but completely different communities. I've felt a lot more camaraderie with all the different people I'm competing with. It's a lot more like the energy is not just all about me. It's like everyone wants to see, like I see a lot more people wanting everyone to succeed. And it's not just a show. It's not just, like this is all for clout or anything like that. Powerlifting became a lot of that from what I saw. And I just enjoy it. Like it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more things going on. It's a lot quicker pace.
CJ?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head of camaraderie. That's the thing. You'll have everyone cheering for you no matter what. Even if you're battling it out in the events, if you're not the one competing, you're cheering for that person. We're all in the sport to see cool stuff. We want the other people to do cool stuff. We want to do cool stuff. It just, the sport is fun. The sport is cool. We're lifting rocks. Let's be real here. It's like it's not super serious, but it's definitely a sport that's very serious as well because it's the heavy amount and pushing the human body to its limit. And we're really seeing the limit get jumped over and over and over. And if it's not me, it's someone else. And it's just cool to see that. That's the biggest thing. It's like the only sport, again, where everyone cheers for everyone. I can't say anything more about that. That's kept me in it for so long when I wasn't good at it.
Dee, what about you? What's the greatest thing Strongman gives you that no other sports can?
The friendliness. Coming from powerlifting, like Jon said, it's kind of very, I guess there's like self-centered in a way. They kind of just, you only care about themselves. But I feel like Strongman's also like a different, and it has its differences in the sport, but it is really fun. Keeps you on your toes. You're not only just moving heavy weight in a static aspect, but you're also moving heavy weight under a 60-second time cap. So I feel like it gives it, that thrill aspect.
I think it's so cool that when similar questions like this get asked to us as athletes, that we all want to say the same thing right off the bat. It's the friendship, the camaraderie, the atmosphere of being cheered on by the people that you are directly competing against. It's so unique to the sport. And that's why, like, when the intimidation factor of the sport in this first place, the last thing you would expect as a newcomer coming into this is to be welcomed with open arms and cheered for by your fellow rival. And I think that is a very cool phenomenon at play, especially in a sport where you get to test yourself against real world objects and real world strength, compared to powerlifting where it's just squat, deadlift, and bench press, which are great lifts and they are very true measures of strength. But Strongman is an infinite list of different things that you could be doing that translates over to real world ability. And I've seen it in athletes that I've coached over the years, especially when I ask them to pull their vehicles for the first time. And they get to realize this inner power that they didn't know was there. I am moving the vehicle that usually moves me. And getting to realize that power in oneself and watching it grow and be nourished over the years, and then to have that nourished right back by the exact people you are testing yourself against is just one of the coolest things. And it is so unique to the sport. I cherish it heavily. And the greatest things that I've taken away from this sport, beside from proving to myself what I'm capable of, are the relationships and the bonds that I've forged over the years in this. You all included. I mean, I've gotten to meet some really amazing people in this sport, and those types of bonds and relationships are what get taken with you in the years to come, especially in a time when we might not be able to do this anymore for whatever reason. You still are left with that lasting effect and the people that you got to meet along the way. So very good question asked there. And I want to end this episode the same way I end all these other episodes. And I want you guys to space out with me for a little bit. And this week in space, there was some pretty cool stuff happening. And I feel like I say that every single week, that there's some cool stuff happening in space, but it could not be more true on this week. So for the first time in history, we got to redirect an asteroid. NASA's DART program, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, sent a craft to 2 asteroids that were out there out in space. And the idea was that this craft should impact the asteroid and see if it could change its path. In the untimely and unfortunate scenario where we would have something coming into a crash course with Earth, are we going to be able to effectively defend ourselves against it? And the thing happened. We sent the DART craft out there, and it redirected the asteroid, not by a huge margin. It changed its orbit by about 1% around the larger asteroid, but we had an effect on redirecting an asteroid there. And I think that is really freaking awesome. But what I want to know, if we had an asteroid coming down to Earth that could not be redirected, if we had 2 weeks left before this asteroid hit and it was ultimately going to result in the entire Earth being obliterated, how would you all spend these last 2 weeks? Give some thought on that for a little bit. Because 2 weeks left in existence here, Strongman doesn't really seem to take that big of a seat anymore at that point. And we're all competitive Strongman athletes. What would you do with those last 2 weeks if an asteroid was coming to Earth and going to be the end of us all? CJ, how would you spend your final 2 weeks before Armageddon?
I would honestly just try to travel and see as much as I could. I would want to say eat a lot of the food I didn't have the opportunity to eat. I doubt people want to be working making that food. So I think just finding a way to travel and see as much like nature as I could, or something like visually that I have not seen yet. Like going like a road trip and just like see cool stuff that's natural. I guarantee people aren't going to be wanting to work if that's the situation. So if I can't like do the other stuff, so it's like that would be one thing that I'd have to take advantage of.
And that's coming from a Coloradoan. You know, you say you want to travel. I'm thinking you're already in paradise, my friend. Where would you want to travel to?
Anywhere and everywhere. I feel like there's just like, I don't know, there's no like set spot, I would say. I would just literally just drive and see what I could find and like make a road map. I would probably plan it like a whole map. I'll see any spots in the country I've not seen yet. I've been fortunate to see a lot of them. But yeah, I don't really have a one specific spot. I'll try to get as much travel as I could.
What about you, John? How would you spend your last 2 weeks before Armageddon?
Probably go hand in hand with him pretty much. I'd like to travel a lot. Probably it'd pretty much be just within the U.S. because I'm assuming no planes are going to be flying because no one's going to want to kind of do that. So, I might just go steal a plane and try to fly it, see what happens. I mean,
hey, man, what do you have to lose?
The chaos.
I like that idea, John. I might jump on that with you and try to steal a plane.
That's not a terrible idea. See what happens.
Yeah. D, how would you spend?
I might still be able to operate a nuclear submarine. Who knows?
I was going to say sky's the limit, but I think sea's the limit is the more appropriate thing to say there. Yeah. What about you, D? How would you spend your last 2 weeks?
Probably traveling.
Yeah.
With my family though, because we only have 2 weeks. But yeah, traveling, eating all the food that I haven't eaten, and maybe hitting some PRs. Because you only have 2 weeks left.
I feel like that is the real opportune time to go full on YOLO. Like that is the time that you do it. But traveling with family versus traveling without. Have you traveled with your family? Recently.
Not recently, but we are going to travel to Florida together. Just because we haven't done like a family road trip, so we do want to stop and like sightsee.
Nice.
So I feel like it'll take away from the fact that I have to cut weight.
Because everyone's family is different. Some people traveling with family might be the last thing that they would want to do, but it sounds like you already have a good road trip ahead, and it's just time to really absorb all those family moments, at least in those last 2 weeks. I would say, we're all on the same track. I would want to travel. I would want to head up to the mountains, like near where CJ lives, or even keep going further up. Maybe I've always wanted to go to Alaska. If I haven't gone to Alaska at that point, I know it would be like a 5-day drive, but
we have 2 weeks.
Got 2 weeks to do it. Why not? But I just feel like there's a
lot of stuff on the way.
A lot of stuff on the way. A lot of food on the way. A lot of I would want to go see if I could find that. Y'all see that Fat Bear Week that happened this week? I would want to see if I could go find Bear 747, that 1,400-pound mammoth of a bear, and take a picture with him. Maybe even just try to give him a hug. I only got 2 weeks left, right? Like he's fat, he's overfed, he's ready to go into hibernation. Why not? But I hope that day never comes. And it seems like for the first time in history, we have a planetary defense system that has proven itself to be effective, at least to some margin. And I think when I had you on the podcast very early on in the start of Titan Talk, we talked about potential scenarios where Earth could end, and the asteroid collision was one of them. And we're at a point in time where we can officially say we have plans in place to where we could actually deflect it or make a hope for humanity, at least. And I think that's freaking cool. Guys, where can everyone find you all at on social media? John?
Instagram, I guess, like Low Arm Anomaly.
CJ?
Instagram at the Giant Slayer Krause.
And D?
Instagram at Deeandra Alexis.
And you can find me on Instagram at Texas Titan Gabe. I have been joined on this episode of Titan Talk with my Los Titans athlete, Deeandra Flores, Jon Parker, and CJ Krause, all heading to the official Strongman Games in Florida next month, November. Guys, I'm so proud of you all. I wish you all the absolute best. I know we are going to hammer these last few weeks of training hard. Then we're going to hammer the recovery hard, and you all are going to do some pretty amazing things. Once again, I'm proud of you all, and thank you for choosing me to be on this journey with you all, and thank you for coming on Titan Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you safety, curiosity, strength, and passion out there as you wayfare this universe of power. Until next time, this has been Titan Talk. Take care.